You've heard of protest marches, but have you heard of power plates? These forgotten soul food dishes didn't just taste good, they literally fueled the fight for freedom. Before we begin, hit like and subscribe. Today we revisit 10 powerful plates from the civil rights era. Stop scrolling. What if the most comforting plate of soul food wasn't just delicious, but a secret weapon that fueled the civil rights movement? Get ready to uncover history. During the cold winter of 1963, this soup became a quiet form of resistance. Marchers returned with frozen hands and tired feet, only to be revived by steaming bowls served on church steps in North Philadelphia. It wasn't elegant, but it was powerful proof that even with limited means, a community could feed both body and spirit. Some neighbors dismissed it as too bitter, too funky, but to those who shared it, that flavor was the taste of survival and belonging. One spoonful carried the unspoken message, we've been here, we're still here. Pepper pot soup wasn't just a meal, it was history ladled into a bowl, reminding everyone that scraps could be turned into strength. Blackbird Stew was never about luxury, it was about survival and ingenuity. In the rural South, during the early 1962, when boycotts and voter registration drives cost many families their jobs and their paychecks, food often had to come from the land itself. Young boys with slingshots or handmade traps brought home small blackbirds, and elders knew exactly how to turn those meager catches into a sustaining meal. The birds were plucked, cleaned, and simmered slowly with onions, wild greens, and whatever roots could be gathered. A splash of vinegar added sharpness, while time over the fire turned tough meat into tender bites. Families gathered on back steps or porches under the moonlight, sharing one pot as if it were a feast. It wasn't just food, it was proof that no matter how lean the times, they could still nourish one another. For many, the taste of Blackbird Stew carried more than flavor. It carried memory. Elders passed down the knowledge of how to stretch a meal and how to stay proud, even with a half-full belly. Every bowl was a lesson in resilience, a reminder that unity could grow strong over the simplest pot of stew. Raccoon stew might raise eyebrows today, but during the civil rights era, it was a familiar comfort across the Mississippi Delta and the Gullah community. Preparing it took patience first, soaking the meat overnight in salt water, then cooking it slowly with onions, peppers, and a splash of vinegar or tomato until the dark, rich flesh softened and slipped easily from the bone. In the winter of 1960, after the first wave of student sit-ins, many young activists came home bruised, hungry, and uncertain about their future. Scholarships had been lost, jobs taken away, but when a pot of raccoon stew bubbled on Grandma's stove, it meant you were still cared for. The kitchen filled with its earthy aroma, wrapping the weary in a sense of safety and belonging. Around the table, bowls were passed, steam rising against cracked windows. The stew didn't judge, didn't ask, it simply fed. And in that simple act, it bound people together, tighter than fear ever could. To those who tasted it, raccoon stew wasn't just food. It was reassurance that no matter what the world stripped away, home and family would always give back. Back in the rural South, baked possum with sweet potatoes was considered a feast for hard times. If a family caught a plump possum fattened on persimmons, they had more than just meat, they had a story to share. The animal was carefully cleaned, rubbed with salt, sometimes parboiled, then roasted slowly in the oven. Around it, sweet potatoes soaked up the juices, caramelizing into sticky, rich bites that tasted like molasses. During the harsh winter of 1962-inch Georgia, when SNCC organizers slept on church floors and hid from night riders, this dish brought warmth and courage. Families with little to spare placed these meals on the table anyway, offering comfort where fear tried to take root. One elder was remembered saying, "Ain't no room for fear when your belly full and your people standing tall." The smell of roasting possum, mingled with the sweetness of yams, told marchers they were safe for the night, maybe even for tomorrow. It was never just about filling stomachs. It was about feeding the spirit, keeping the fire lit in the stove, in the home, and deep in the soul. They called it the poor man's ribs, but to those in the Mississippi Delta fried buffalo fish, ribs were a source of pride. Cleaning a buffalo fish wasn't easy. Thick scales and tiny bones made it tricky, but skilled hands carved out the rib racks just right. The ribs were dredged in cornmeal, dropped into hot lard, and fried until golden brown with a satisfying crunch. A dash of hot sauce or mustard on the side turned them into a meal that could rival any steak. In 1965, when weary marchers returned from Selma, it wasn't prime rib that welcomed them home. It was paper sacks filled with these fish ribs, passed hand to hand on porches and roadside stands. The crispy edges snapped between teeth like music, while elders sat quietly savoring not just the taste, but the moment of hard-earned dignity. What made them unforgettable wasn't the cut of fish, but the way it carried meaning. A single bite said, "You did good, baby. Now rest." Even the smallest rib held the weight of resilience, proving that struggle could be seasoned and fried into something deeply nourishing. Out by the bayous and creeks, snapping turtles became a meal born from patience and courage. Catching one wasn't easy, sometimes done with baited lines, sometimes by hand, but once in the pot, the tough meat transformed. Simmered slowly with onions, garlic, and a pinch of cayenne, turtle meat turned tender, almost like beef, and the broth came out dark, rich, and full of depth. Some cooks even added boiled eggs or okra to stretch it further. In 1963, after the tragic Birmingham church bombing, one Louisiana family served turtle stew to grieving neighbors. No speeches were made, just bowls passed hand to hand, steam rising like unspoken prayers. In that silence, the stew spoke volumes, offering strength where words failed. A curious child once asked, "Why do we eat turtle?" An elder answered softly, "Because it's hard outside, soft inside, just like us." That pot held more than food. It held a lesson in endurance. Each spoonful was testimony, reminding families that even in the hardest times, tenderness and strength could live side by side. In the country, squirrel wasn't strange, it was supper. Boys would head out at first light with a .22 rifle or even a slingshot, coming back with a sack full of squirrels ready for the skillet. Sometimes they were fried, whole crispy outside and juicy within. Other times cooks made fricassee, browning the meat, then simmering it in rich gravy with onions and carrots until it fell right off the bone. Served over rice or biscuits, it was the kind of meal that hushed a hungry room. During the freedom summer of 1,964-inch, Mississippi food had to stretch to feed dozens of volunteers. One elder recalled cooking 6 squirrels into a pot of fricassee that fed 14 organizers planning their next march. Nobody asked for seconds out of greed, they asked because it tasted like unity. Even the youngest dipped biscuits into that thick gravy with shining eyes, learning that hope doesn't need much meat to grow. Squirrel fricassee carried more than flavor. It carried the proof that a determined community could make plenty out of little, and in doing so, keep courage alive. Rabbit was considered Sunday best meat in lean times, something special when the family trap along the fence line or a lucky shot brought one home. Cleaned and simmered slowly in seasoned broth, the rabbit fell apart tender. Then came the dumplings, hand-rolled thick and doughy, dropped into the bubbling pot until they soaked up every bit of flavor. The result was a dish that was more than filling, it was love you could taste. In 1961, as student protests lit up Nashville, one church elder cooked rabbit and dumplings for teenagers just released from jail. She stood behind the pulpit with a dented pot, ladling out bowls to kids with bruises on their faces but fire in their hearts. For them, that simple meal tasted like dignity restored. Years later, many of those same activists would recall the dish not just as food, but as the first time they truly felt seen. Not as troublemakers, but as somebody's child, somebody's future. Rabbit and dumplings lingered in memory because it carried both nourishment and affirmation, filling stomachs while reminding a generation that they were worth fighting for. Poke salad wasn't something you could buy in a store, it came wild from the earth. The leaves picked from ditches and backyards were dangerous if handled wrong. They had to be boiled 2, sometimes 3 times to draw out the poison. But once seasoned with bacon, grease, garlic, and onion, they transformed into a bitter, soulful dish that tasted like hard-earned survival. During voter registration drives in rural Alabama, poke salad showed up on many dinner tables. Families who had lost wages for daring to sign their names on a list leaned on what the land freely gave. Bowls of wilted greens, glossy with grease, reminded people that even when money ran dry, resilience did not. Elders often said, poke salad taught patience, treat it right and it will sustain you. Mistreat it and it could turn against you, much like the world outside. That lesson stayed with every bite. In its simplicity, it whispered, we will make it anyway. For a community facing injustice, poke salad wasn't just food. It was a quiet symbol of endurance, rooted in both the soil and the soul. Hot water cornbread, sometimes called Johnny cakes, was one of the simplest and most reliable dishes in Southern kitchens. Just cornmeal, a pinch of salt, and boiling water mixed by hand, shaped into patties, then fried in a cast iron skillet until golden brown. Crisp on the outside and soft inside, it didn't need butter or toppings to shine. In homes where flour was scarce or time was short, these little rounds hit the table, fast-filling bellies with something solid and dependable. By 1968, after the Memphis sanitation strike and Dr. King's final speech, Johnny cakes became more than food. They became symbols of perseverance. Families across the South served them in silence, dipping them into beans or stew, eating with heavy hearts but steady hands. Each bite carried the reminder that some traditions never waver, even when the world felt like it was collapsing. Their strength was in their simplicity. They required little but gave much, standing firm when everything else seemed uncertain. To many, hot water cornbread wasn't just bread, it was a promise. A small, humble circle that never let you down, feeding both hunger and hope at the same time. These 10 soul food dishes weren't just meals, they were power plates that carried strength, courage, and unity through some of the hardest years in American history. From pepper pot soup to hot water cornbread, each bite told a story of survival and love. Which of these forgotten dishes speaks to you the most or reminds you of your own family table? Share your thoughts in the comments. We'd love to hear your memories. And if you enjoyed this journey back through flavor and history, don't forget to like, subscribe, and stay tuned for more nostalgic trips down memory lane.